Alright, everyone, we're on to chapter 2. It has about 15 pages. I'm going to try to finish it in one shot. If not, we'll split it up. I don't want to keep these videos any longer than they need to be. I'm not going to recap. Nothing happened. This freaking woman decided she needed to sneak into a hostage situation. Okay. Zach was flipping through digital pictures on his laptop when she climbed into the news van. He took a lot of shots of the on-scene lieutenant and the uniformed cops running into the building, then coming out with the hostages and the handcuffed bank robbers. He even had some pictures of the SWAT team coming out, but he wouldn't send those in. Her boss considered it bad policy to print pictures of cops if it tied them to specific crime scenes. That's a good policy. It's a really good policy. He thought it might lead to retribution against them. Mac wasn't sure if she always agreed with that, but she abided by it. He glanced at her, his eyes full of amusement behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "I thought I was going to have to bail you out of jail." She made a face at him. "Very funny. I'll have you know I got an invitation to visit the SWAT compound this afternoon." His eyes went wide. "Seriously, you think that invite includes me?" She considered that. Dixon hadn't specifically said to come alone, but she didn't want to press her luck by bringing her photographer, especially since the SWAT commander wasn't crazy about cameras. "Probably not right away. Let me work my magic on Dixon first." Zach looked bummed at that, but nodded as he went back to surfing through the photos. "So, did you enjoy being carried to the operations vehicle like a sack of potatoes?" Mac's face heated at the memory. Damn, she should have known Zach wouldn't have missed that. She gave him her best "I'm offended by that comment" look. "It was not carried like a sack of potatoes. Officer Danner simply escorted me to the operations vehicle to meet with the commander of the SWAT team." Zach snorted and spun his laptop around so she could see the screen. There was a picture of Officer Danner running across the street with her in his arms, his hand over her mouth. Her color deepened. He kind of was carrying her like a sack of potatoes. God, that looked bad. "Maybe you could keep that off the shared drive?" she asked Zach. He laughed. "Sure thing, but it's definitely going on the best of Mac's Stone disk." Max stuck her tongue out at him. Zach loved reminding her he had visual evidence of all of her most embarrassing moments, and that she shouldn't forget it. He was still flipping through the photos when something caught her attention. "Stop. Go back a couple of pics." Zach didn't ask why, but just scrolled back to a half a dozen pictures. "Stop," she said. "Go slow from there." He clicked one picture at a time, giving her a chance to look at each of them before moving to the next. She studied each SWAT officer's photo as it filled the screen. Zach had captured them coming out of the brick building. They had their ski masks pulled up, and under their helmets, each man's handsome face was covered with a light green sheen of glistening sweat. Oh my God, she used glistening. I knew that word was going to come up. Zach moved from the SWAT guys to random pictures of hostages, EMTs, and bank robbers. When he got to the end, she had him back up and scroll through the same pictures again. Mac leaned closer, focusing on the photos of Martinez, Delaney, Taylor, and Riggs. She didn't know what it was, but something was gnawing at her. Then she had it. "These were taken the moment the SWAT team first came out of the building, right?" "Yeah, I was focused on those doors from the moment the cops and the EMTs ran in until you came out of the truck. That's where all the action was." He frowned up at her. "What's up?" Max studied the pictures one more time, just to be sure she hadn't missed anything, but she hadn't. None of the men were holding anything other than their weapons, and none of their tactical vests had pouches that could hold what she was looking for. Zach looked from her to the photo of the 4 highly trained officers coming out of the warehouse, and back at her. "What is it?" "They shut down the power to the building before they went in. It was pitch black in there. I saw it on the monitors in the truck. But the SWAT guys aren't carrying any night vision goggles." Zach glanced at the picture again. "Maybe they left him in the warehouse?" She shook her head. "No way. Those things cost a fortune." "So what are you saying, that these guys can see in the dark?" Mac didn't answer. Thinking the SWAT officers could see in the dark without the aid of night vision goggles would have made her sound crazy, especially since she hadn't told Zach about the drug angle yet. But what if Marvin was right and the SWAT guys were using performance-enhancing drugs that let them see better in the dark? Crap, that was even more outlandish than a drug that made him crazy strong. She was busy examining the photos for the missing night vision goggles when something else caught her attention. She pointed at Diego Martinez's right hand. "What does that look like to you?" Zach leaned close to the computer screen. "What the hell?" He fiddled with the keyboard, zooming in on Martinez's hand. It looks like blood. That's what I thought. She turned to look out the window at the big operations vehicle just in time to see Martinez and Delaney climb into the cab. Was Martinez holding his arm a little funny? Did we just see an injured officer drive off when there are half a dozen EMTs who could have looked at him? Zach asked. I think we did. Why the hell would they do that? I don't know, yet. But she was damn sure she was going to find out. She had a sneaking suspicion it was because Martinez was worried about whatever drug it was that would show up in his blood. If she was right, then there really was a story here. Maybe they have their own people looking at it. Maybe someone patched him up. These clues suck, by the way. They really do. Are you sure this is a good idea? I'm sure, Gage said. Martinez was barely scratched by the bullet. He can get patched up at the compound. Xander swore. That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it. Gage waited until the news van drove away before he turned to his senior squad leader. He knew Xander wasn't worried about the minor graze wound Martinez had sustained during the entry. It was almost closed up already and would barely leave a scar if they took care of it right. But Xander definitely wasn't too thrilled at the idea of having a woman reporter at that, sticking her nose in their business. Gage hadn't expected him to be. Xander didn't like outsiders in general, and female outsiders in particular. Has he had a bad run-in with women? In his opinion, both were bad for the pack, of course. Don't want to disturb the brohood. Xander was never shy about letting him know it. And if anything was bad for the pack, Xander was never shy about letting him know it. Gage glanced at the other squad leader. What do you think, Mike? The big man shrugged. I gotta agree with Xander on this one, Gage. You know Mackenzie Stone has a reputation for digging pretty hard to get the story she's after, right? Gage went out of his way to let his two assistant squad leaders have a say in how the team did things. But when you lead a group of alphas, So there's like a million alphas in this pack, right? And then you have the main alpha that controls all of them. How does that work? But we're going to count it. Every time the word alpha is used, y'all take a shot. So let's read the sentence. But when you lead a group of alphas the way he did, it was impossible for everyone to agree on everything all the time, and that's when he had to pull rank. I know all about her reputation, he said. She wasn't looking to write a fluff piece on how we do our job. If she's sniffing, it's because she thinks there's a story there, and if she thinks that, she's not going to stop looking just because we made it hard for her. If anything, that will only make her dig deeper. So what, we just make it easy for her? Xander demanded. No, we don't make it easy, Gage said. We bring her in and control the flow of information she receives. We show her what we want her to see, and then when we want her to see it. We make sure she gets the message, and only the message we want her to get. Mike raised his brows. You honestly think that'll work? She doesn't come across as the kind of person you can mislead easily. I'd rather have her where I can keep my eye on her instead of constantly worrying about where she's going to show up and what she'll find on her own. Mark regarded him thoughtfully. You sure this is about keeping an eye on a possible threat? Gage pinned him with a hard look, meaning? Mike didn't back down, meaning I couldn't help but notice how nice the inside of the operations truck smelled when we walked in. In fact, it wouldn't be a stretch to say Miss Stone has a scent our kind might find irresistible. Sure that doesn't have something to do with your sudden interest in her? Really? Really? Gage did his best to keep his face unreadable, but his heartbeat steady. But it was damn tough, mostly because Mike was right. Gage had noticed how good Mackenzie Stone smelled. Her scent was so intoxicating he'd almost groaned out loud when she stepped into the operations vehicle. Okay. I love nice-smelling men. There's just something really sexy about men that smell nice. But I don't think I've ever had the need to, groan out loud when I'm around. It's more an appreciative, that's nice, not, oh God. No. I mean, do men do that? Does that happen? Is that a thing? That's kind of creepy. Not gonna lie. It wasn't some expensive perfume she'd been wearing either, just good old-fashioned feminine pheromones. Luckily, he wasn't ruled by his nose or other parts of his anatomy when it came to making decisions, especially decisions about the pack. He knew the threat Mackenzie Stone presented. He'd been on guard from the moment he spotted her at the compound in her undercover news van 2 days ago. It's obviously not a really good fucking undercover news van. Jesus. Hell, he'd been on alert ever since the public relations department told him she wanted to do a story on SWAT. He turned down her request for an in-depth interview and ride-along, hoping she'd get the hint. He should have known better. After the stunt she pulled today, he figured the only way to get rid of her was to give her the interview she wanted. I make decisions about pack affairs with the head above my shoulders, not the one below my belt. He said to Mike, "If I think it's a good idea we keep Miss Stone close, it's because it's best for the pack, not because she smells good." Mike shrugged. "Just checking. If you're not interested in her in that way, maybe I'll look at her Facebook page, see if she's available." Mike might have sounded casual, but he was still testing him. He wanted to know if Mackenzie's pheromones were making Gage think with his dick instead of his head. "You could do that," Gage said, "but I wouldn't if I were you." Mike tensed as if bracing for a fight. Besides him, Xander did the same. "Why is that?" Mike asked. "Because I don't think she's that into you," Gage told him. "I mean, you're not very attractive, and you sweat a lot. Women might find that gross." Xander stared at him, speechless for once. Mike stared at him, speechless for once. Xander laughed and slapped Mike on the shoulder. "Dude, I've told you that sweating thing was going to ruin your love life. Now even the boss man has noticed. You need to get that looked at." Okay, maybe this lady likes men that sweat a lot. Who am I to judge? Mike scowled at him, his brows drawing together to make his already chiseled features look extra fierce. "I don't have a sweating problem, you jackass. I'm wearing 35 pounds of Kevlar on hot Texas days. Of course I'm going to sweat." "I'm not sweating," Xander pointed out. "That's because you haven't hit puberty yet," Mike retorted. "But just wait. In another year or two, it'll happen. I promise." Gage chuckled as the squad leaders unloaded their weapons and put away their gear. Another tense situation diffused, and he didn't mean the one with the hostages. Keeping his pack of alpha werewolves under control was just as much a part of a job as figuring out when to greenlight an operation or determining the best way to enter a building full of armed thugs. In some ways, it was the toughest part of the job, because nobody wanted to have a bunch of out-of-control SWAT types running around town, especially when they also happened to be werewolves. Yeah, they were a pain in the ass sometimes, but at the end of the day, they were his pack, and he wouldn't want it any other way. "What the hell's going on, Vince?" Gage asked as the internal affairs officer ran the same list of questions for the third time. Sorry, if it looks like I'm randomly switching scenes, there's actually these little, if I don't know if you can see them, oops, asterisks there that kind of denote a change in scenery. I don't really know how to gracefully change it, so just run with it. "What the hell's going on, Vince?" Gage asked as the internal affairs officer ran down the same list of questions for the third time. After dropping Mike off at the compound, he and Xander had come to police headquarters for what was supposed to be a quick debriefing on what had obviously been a clean shooting, but they had already been there for almost 2 hours. The gray-haired man looked at him over the top of his glasses. "Just being thorough, Gage." "That was a crock of shit. It was standard procedure in an officer-involved shooting to talk to both the cop who done the shooting and a supervisor on the scene. But if this was just about being thorough, Internal Affairs wouldn't have put him and Xander in separate rooms for questioning." Wouldn't they? Isn't that standard to question the officers involved in separate rooms? I don't know. I should probably ask. "You already have a statement from the woman Xander saved," Gage pointed out, and she corroborated what he said. The gunman was in the process of pulling the trigger on her. According to the other hostages in the E. Brown building and the employees at the bank they robbed, the guy had been coked up to all hell. Even his crew admitted he hadn't been in control. How much more thorough do you need to be? "Just work with me on this, okay?" Vince sighed. "Trust me, we have our reasons." Trust and internal affairs normally didn't go together, but it wasn't as if Gage had much of a choice, unless he wanted to call in a union rep and really make a mess of the situation, which he didn't. So Gage leaned back in his chair and answered Vince Coletti's questions again. God, he hoped Xander was keeping his cool in the other room. His senior squad leader was smart and had been in those shooting reviews before, so he knew what to say, and more importantly, what not to say. Okay, I guess that's a reference to the werewolf thing. If the questioning seemed like it was heading in a bad direction, he was savvy enough to ask for his union rep. But Xander also had a short fuse sometimes. If IA got in his face, he might tell them to pound sand. I'm sure that's supposed to mean something, but I've never seen that written anywhere. I've never heard anyone say it before. "Okay, I think we're good," Vince said, after the fourth rehash of his story. "We're going to need to talk to Corporal Riggs for a little while longer, though." Gage stared at the man. "Seriously?" Vince gave him what was probably supposed to be a placating smile. Don't worry, I'll have the patrol give him a ride out to the compound. Which was Aya's way of saying he didn't want Gage hanging around because he was going to take a hell of a lot longer than a little while. But getting into it with Coletti wasn't going to help. While he might be more than ready to rip someone in half right now, Gage reined in his inner wolf. He jerked open the door and stormed out of the interrogation room, almost running over his boss, Deputy Chief Hal Mason. If he didn't know any better, he'd think Hal had been waiting for him. Why the hell is I grilling my senior corporal? Gage demanded. Maybe because he fucking shot somebody? Hal waited until Vince had gone into the room where they were questioning Xander before answering. Aya is just doing their due diligence on the shooting, that's all. They aren't trying to screw Corporal Riggs. You have my word on that. Gage snorted. You could have had me fooled. The way his boss was looking at him made Gage think Hal wasn't telling him everything, but the deputy chief only sighed. Go back to work, and make sure Riggs gets a ride out to the compound when IA is done with him. Gage hated the idea of leaving Xander with IA, but Coletti could have him in interrogation the rest of the day, and he still had to tell the pack about Mackenzie Stone, who'd be at the compound in a little over an hour. Shit. Tell Xander I'll see him back at the compound. Hal nodded. I will. And Gage, good job out there today. Gage grunted. Luckily, there was no sign of Mackenzie Stone's news van in the lot when Gage arrived at the compound. He parked the SUV, then went around to the training building, figuring that's where everybody would probably be. He heard the sounds of growling before he even opened the door. Officers Landry Cooper and Eric Becker were sprawled on the couch in the day room watching TV and eating popcorn. What the hell's going on back there? Gage demanded, jerking his head toward the rear of the building. Cooper, the team's explosives expert and coincidentally, or maybe more not so coincidentally, the most laid-back and control member of the pack, shrugged. I think you'd have to be pretty fucking laid back to be an explosives expert. Just saying. Martinez and Delaney came back a little fired up from today's action, he said in his southern drawl. They got into an argument with some of the other guys, and now they're just working it out, which was code for going at each other like a couple of MMA fighters. Gage swore. Sometimes he felt more like a damn schoolteacher than a commander of a team of highly trained police officers, and Mike didn't think it was necessary to break it up before they destroyed something expensive. Cooper grabbed a handful of popcorn from the big bowl Becker was holding. Domestic abuse call came in about an hour ago. Mike took Duncan and Boudoir with him. Didn't you consider that maybe you should step in and do something? Gage all but snarled. Cooper didn't take his eyes off the TV show he was watching, a damn G.I. Joe cartoon for crying out loud. Not my argument. And sometimes I felt like he was in charge of a daycare center for out-of-control werewolves. Gage didn't waste his breath asking Becker why he didn't do anything. The surveillance expert was one of the newest members of the team. He might be as big and tough as everyone in the unit, but they weren't going to pay attention to anything he said. Besides, Gage didn't think he could pry the tech and the electronics expert away from their tub of popcorn. He headed back toward the back of the building, wincing at a particularly loud thud. There was always a little roughhousing after a mission. It was how werewolves dealt with stress, but usually he, Xander, or Mike were around to keep things from getting out of hand. And when you have 16 oversized alpha werewolves in one pack, things could get pretty out of hand pretty damn quick. He noticed a couple of broken chairs and a crushed desk as he passed the classroom. The disagreement must have started there, then moved to the back of the building, where the weight room and gym were. He hoped they were in the gym instead of the weight room. Not only was there less stuff they could break, but there was also fewer things they could use as weapons. But while 3 members of the team, Senior Corporal Zane Kendrick, Senior Corporal Trevor McCall, and Officer Alex Trevino, were in the gym tossing around a basketball, they weren't the source of the racket he'd heard. His nose confirmed the identity of the men in the weight room before he got there. All 6 remaining members of the team were in the weight room. Damn it. On the bright side, only 4 of the men were fighting. 2 of them, Senior Corporals Jaden Brooks and Carter Nelson, were doing their best to keep the other cops from grabbing anything they could use as weapons, while at the same time working just as hard to keep them from destroying the workout equipment. They were only marginally successful at both tasks. Gage ducked to avoid a 45-pound weight someone threw across the room. It smashed against the wall of mirrors on the far side of the room, completely shattering the floor-to-ceiling piece of glass. Shit, he'd paid for that out of his own pocket. A low rumble erupted from his lips. This was the reason alpha wolves rarely ever got together in a group. It was damn near impossible to keep them from fighting. But when he'd taken over the SWAT unit 8 years ago, he'd made the decision to seek out the best cops in the country and get them on his team. If that meant bringing in other werewolves, that was what he did. But days like this, like today, made him wonder if he was worth it. Martinez and Delaney had squared off against Connor Malone and the newest member of the team, Max Lowry. Their claws were out, their canines were extended, and their eyes gleaming gold. All they had done so far was slash each other up, but their faces and jaws were changing shape even now, which meant bites would be coming next, and they were much tougher to recover from. Worse, Malone's back was already starting to bunch up in a way it did before full shift, and if Malone shifted into his 240-pound wolf form, someone was probably going to get killed. Gage let out a deep growl and waited in the midst of the brawl, letting his fangs slide out in a partial shift as he started laying backhand swings that sent people flying. The moment he had them separated, he grabbed Malone by the shoulders and yanked him off his feet, slamming him against the remaining mirror hard enough to shatter it like the others. He then bared his teeth and let loose a snarl, loud enough to be heard well outside the compound. He didn't care who heard. He wanted their full attention, and he wanted it now. Malone immediately relaxed in his grip, while Martinez, Delaney, and Lowry took a few steps back. Gage held on to his lead sniper until the other man had completely shed any vestige of his wolf form. By the time he turned to look at the other three, they had shifted back too. There was no evidence of the werewolves they'd been, except for the bloody claw marks covering their bodies and shredding their uniforms. Gage didn't shift back. He wanted them to get a good look at his yellow-gold eyes and gleaming fangs. "What the hell's wrong with the four of you?" he demanded. "I walk in here expecting to find a team of professional cops, and instead I find you acting like a bunch of freaking out-of-control chihuahuas." He pointedly looked around the room at the broken mirrors, crushed weight benches, and torn mats. "We paid to renovate this weight room out of our own pockets, and you've wrecked it with your bullshit. Somebody here better start talking fast, or I'm going to give in to my first instinct and have you all transferred to bicycle patrol handing out parking tickets downtown." "They started it, Sarge." To his credit, Delaney actually looked a little chagrined, and at all the damage it caused. "Martinez and I were talking about him getting shot in the arm, and Lowry said it happens because we didn't know what the hell we were doing." Gage stared menacingly at Delaney. "The four of you tore up a pack property because the new guy was trying to get under your skin?" "That's not the way it went down, Sarge," Lowry protested. "No?" Gage hoped like hell this new pup wasn't about to say something that was going to get him buried. "So, how did it go down? Please, tell me." Out of the corner of his eye, Gage saw Brooks and Nelson exchange a worried look, like they thought he might snap someone's neck. He'd be lying if he said that the thought hadn't crossed his mind. He'd never do it, of course. Yeah, 'cause they're fucking cops. Unfortunately, these kinds of brawls happened a lot. Regardless of the formal rank structure placed on them by the Dallas PD, his wolves were constantly challenging the pecking order within the pack, as each cop tried to outperform the other, and each squad tried to make its group look better. With all the new guys he'd brought in over the years, he shouldn't be surprised the issue had come to a head again. Well, he was going to nip this competition shit in the bud right now. His team would be one well-oiled unit, or he'd tear it down and start over. "So?" he prompted Lowry again. Lowry swallowed hard. Gage knew the man wasn't actually afraid of him, but he was the unchallenged alpha of the pack, and... drink. Whether younger guys knew it or not, that position came with a certain amount of inherent control over the other pack members. Standing this close to his pissed-off lead alpha, Lowry probably felt seriously uneasy for the first time in his life. Gage hated making any of his men feel that way, but he learned he had to either lead them by force of will or learn to live with chaos. Gage didn't like chaos. "It was nothing, Sarge," Lowry finally conceded. "We were just messing around and things got out of hand. It won't happen again." Gage held him there until he was sure all four of them had formally received the message. Then he lowered Delaney to the floor. "No, it won't happen again," he agreed, "because I'm breaking up your teams. Lowry, when Mike gets back, let him know you've been reassigned to Xander's team, and that Delaney's going to be your entry buddy. I want him to put you two shoulder to shoulder on every mission from this day forward." Gage ignored the look of shock on Lowry's face and turned to look at Martinez. "I assume you got the arm looked at before you decided to get in a fight?" The stocky man flexed his injured arm. "Yeah, Trevino fixed me up the moment we got back. It's fine." "Good," Gage said, "because you'll be taking Lowry's spot on Mike's team. Same thing applies. You'll be tied to Malone every time the two of you walk through an hostile doorway." Martinez opened his mouth to argue, but Gage silenced him with a full glare. Malone, on the other hand, was too fussy from his recent near shift to keep his trap shut. "Sarge, I'm your best sniper. I don't usually go through doors." "You do now," Gage told him. "So just suggest you spend a lot of time with your new entry buddy and learn real fast." "Sarge, you can't do this," Delaney said. "We know we screwed up and we'll fix everything, I swear, but you can't break up Martinez and me. We've been on the same team for more than 3 years." "Then you'll be able to bring Lowry up to speed on Xander's tactics." "But Sarge, have you ever seen how tight the shorts are on those biker cops?" Gage asked. Delaney snapped his mouth shut. Gage looked at Brooks and Nelson. "Next time I expect you to get in the middle of a fight and break it up, or you'll be wearing the bike shorts, and I'm not sure they make any of you in your size, Brooks." The big African-American The big African American shifted from one foot to the other. The ex-college fullback was probably envisioning himself in tight blue shorts and perched on a bicycle. Apparently it wasn't a pretty image. Sure thing, Sergeant. Good. Gage jerked his head at the four junior officers. Make sure they get those wounds cleaned up right before they start to heal. And make sure Martinez doesn't rip his open again. All he needed was for Martinez to be the first werewolf to get an infection. Going to the hospital really wasn't something werewolves preferred to do. Gage started for the door, then stopped and turned back to them. And get this mess cleaned up. I want everyone in the classroom in 15 minutes. He didn't need to see his men's scowls to know he wasn't their favorite person right now. It made him wonder what they were going to think of him when he told them about Mackenzie Stone. Okay, a few more pages left. Xander isn't getting jacked up, Gage said for the third time. He started their all-call meeting with a quick briefing of the hostage situation earlier, then touched on the detailed level of questioning he and Xander had gone through downtown. At least he'd planned on it being brief. He wanted to get to the real reason he'd called everyone together, Mackenzie Stone, but he couldn't get the team to focus on anything other than internal affairs grilling one of their own. Then why is IA still questioning him? Remy Bourgeois asked, a trace of his Louisiana accent coming through. Gage suppressed a growl. Sometimes his guys were bigger conspiracy nuts than Mulder and Scully. They're just going over his statement to make sure that there aren't any inconsistencies that could end up in a lawsuit. They're trying to help him, not screw him. Besides, he's probably already on his way back. Then, if you didn't call us here to talk about Xander, what's this about? Martinez asked. Gage was pleased to see the cop sitting beside his new buddy, Malone. On this other side of the room, Delaney and Lowry were doing the same. Maybe they had the ability to overcome their petty squabbles faster than he'd given them credit for. Yeah, Sarge. Mike was lounging in his chair, a knowing smile on his face. What are we going to talk about? Gage scowled at his squad leader. Mike wasn't going to cut him a break. Damn him. And while the rest of the guys might not know what was going on, they definitely picked up on the strange vibe. Well, everyone except for Cooper. He was reading a damn comic book. I wanted to tell you that we'll be having a visitor hanging around the compound for the next few days, Gage said. What kind of visitor? Cooper asked, raising his gaze from his comic book long enough to show that he was capable of multitasking. Oh, hell. No way to avoid this. Might as well rip off the Band-Aid. A reporter from the Dallas Daily Star, Mackenzie Stone. Gage waited, expecting an immediate firestorm of negative comments, but his announcement was met with complete silence. Though whether that silence was because they were stunned or just indifferent, he couldn't tell. I've seen her picture, Becker said. She's really hot. Okay, that wasn't the comment he expected. Then again, this was Becker. The information tech and electronics surveillance expert always said the first thing that came to his mind. And if to prove his point, Becker pulled out his iPhone and quickly found a picture of the journalist to show the other guys. They took one look at her photo and agreed that Miss Stone was smoking. Damn, sometimes they could be so shallow. Cooper passed the phone back to Becker. Isn't Mackenzie Stone known for her in-depth investigative stories, ones usually involving corrupt politicians or major crime figures? What does she want with us? Yes, let's continue telling the reader about how fucking fantastic she is at her journalism skills. The rest of the unit stopped debating about whether Mackenzie Stone had a boyfriend or not to give Gage a worried look. For all the trouble they caused him with the bickering, the fighting, and the constant effort to move up the pack's command structure, they trusted him to protect and keep hidden the one thing they cared about, their identity as werewolves. Because if they were scared of anything, it was being exposed for what they really were. Gage sat on the edge of the desk at the front of the room. Miss Stone said she wants to see how we operate so she can write a story on how we work together as a team. Do you believe her? Asked Trey Duncan, the unit's other resident medic and entryman. Honestly, I think it's a load of crap. At their surprised looks, he continued. As Cooper said, Miss Stone specializes in digging into serious stories that grab national headlines. Fuck. I doubt she's interested in writing a fluff piece about the city SWAT team. I'm guessing she's seen all of our accolades and figures there's something fishy going on. I don't know if she thinks we're crooked or in league with the criminals we take down or what. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what our angle is. I've decided the best way to get her to go away is to bring her in and let her see what we do. Becker stared at him in disbelief. You're going to tell her we're werewolves? Gage would have laughed if anything about this was funny. No, I'm going to tell her the entire SWAT team is made up... No, I'm not going to tell her the entire SWAT team is made up of werewolves, but I will show her how hard we work and train, how much we care about the people of the city, and what we're willing to risk for them. I'm going to be charming and friendly. We're all going to be charming and friendly. By the time she leaves, Mackenzie Stone will realize we're nothing more than hardworking, dedicated cops, not a story for the evening news. And what if she doesn't buy that line? Mike asked from the back of the room. The smile he wore earlier was gone. What if she keeps digging? Gage met his gaze. I guess it's on me to make sure that doesn't happen, isn't it? He scanned the room. But I need all of your help to do it. As long as Mackenzie Stone is around, you're going to have to stay in complete and total control. No one going to half wolf on me. No one jumping on walls they shouldn't be able to jump. No one running faster than they should be able to run. And definitely no fighting. You need to look like the best SWAT team in the country. Got it? Slow nods came from around the room, Mike included. Gage took a deep breath. Until now, he hadn't realized how hard hiding their secret from Mackenzie Stone was going to be. But his pack was depending on him to keep them safe, and that's what he was going to do. As everyone stood up to get back to work, Gage added one more thing. Miss Stone will be here in less than an hour. I want that weight room cleaned up before she shows up. Get on it. That earned him some groans, but not nearly as many as he expected. Maybe this was going to work. You know, if in today's age, someone came out and said that somebody's SWAT team was comprised of werewolves, I think they would think that the reporter was on some crazy shit. Just saying. Because there's nothing in here, no instance in this current world building that lets us know that people think of these things as a possibility. But whatever. We'll see what happens. Keep going.